for Timmy is unconditional. We were standing in their living room, next to a baby grand with family photos spread out over the top. Mrs. O'Neill held on to one of Timothy, a larger version of the same picture I had on my bulletin board at home. I hoped for their sake he had just moved away from Washington. "You said he was working as a bartender," Sampson asked. "As far as we knew," Mr. O'Neill said, "Tim was saving up for his own place." "And where was that job?" Their eyes went to each other first. Mrs. O'Neill was already in tears. "That's what's so very hard," she said. "We don't even know. It was some kind of private club. Timothy had to sign a confidentiality agreement. He said he couldn't tell us anything about it, for his own protection." Mr. O'Neill picked up for his wife. "We thought he was being a little grandiose at the time, but now I don't know what to believe." I think he did know what to believe, but it wasn't my job to convince the O'Neills either way. These people were desperate to have their son back. I wasn't going to begrudge them whatever it took to get through a difficult interview with 2 police detectives. Finally, I asked to see Timothy's room. We followed the 2 of them back through the kitchen and attached laundry room to what I assumed had once been a maid's quarters. There was a separate entrance from the back hall and a bedroom with its own bathroom, small but with lots of privacy. "We haven't touched anything," Mr. O'Neill said, and then he added almost affectionately, "You can see what a slob he was." My first reaction was that messes are good for hiding things in. The room had as much strewn on the floor as anywhere else. Timothy had never really grown up, had he? There were clothes piled everywhere, on the bed, over the easy chair, on top of the desk. Some of it was just jeans and t-shirts, but there was a lot of expensive-looking stuff, too. The one thing he seemed to keep hung up was a collection of suits and jackets and 3 leather coats. 2 of them were polo, 1 Hermes. That's where I found the haystack needle. Sampson and I had been sifting for about 15 minutes when I pulled a piece of paper out of one of the blazer pockets. It had a string of 10 letters written on it, like the ones from Caroline's date book. This one said, AFIOZMBHCP. I held it up for Sampson to see. "Check this out, John." Mrs. O'Neill stepped back into the room. She'd been waiting outside the door. "What is it? Please tell us." "Could be a phone number, but I'm not sure," I said. "I don't suppose Timothy left his cell phone behind." "No. He was attached to that thing 24/7. I mean, who isn't these days?" She tried a weak smile, and I tried one back, but it was hard. All I could think about was how much more likely it had just gotten that she would never see Timothy again. Chapter 15.
Johnny Tucci had stuck to a rigid system for survival since the trooper car stopped him on I-95. For starters, he never traveled in the same direction for 2 days in a row and never spent more than 24 hours in any one place. In fact, if the skinny girl working the register at the 7-Eleven in Cuttingsville hadn't been such an easy, willing young thing, or if he could even remember the last time he'd gotten laid, he probably would have been long gone by now. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, he was thinking. He was in the middle of his second time around with the register girl when the flimsy door to room 5 at the Parkett Motel opened. 2 men in gray suits strolled in like they had a key or something. How the hell had they gotten in the door? Whatever. They were in. Johnny jumped about 3 feet off the bed and pulled the sheet up to cover himself. So did the girl. Liz? Liesel? Johnny Tucci? The Johnny Tucci? One intruder, the speaker, was a white guy, the other Hispanic, maybe Brazilian. Johnny had no clue who they were, but he sure knew why they'd come to the motel. All the same, he gave it his best. You got the wrong room, man. I never heard of John, whatever you said. Now, please get out. The Hispanic guy fired before Johnny even saw he had a gun in his hand. He flinched hard and almost had a heart attack on the spot. When he looked, the girl, Liesel, was sitting cockeyed against the headboard with a hole in her forehead and blood seeping down through the tip of her nose, then onto her breasts. "Jesus Christ!" Johnny fell off the bed more than got off and then crab-walked himself back into a corner. He'd never actually been shot at before. "Let's try this again." "Johnny Tucci?" said the white dude. "The Johnny Tucci?" Yeah, okay." He kept his hands up, one of them at the side of his face so he wouldn't have to see the girl lying there dead and leaking blood. "How did you find me? What do you want? Why'd you hurt her?" The two guys looked at each other and laughed at his expense. These guys obviously weren't family. They were too white for that, even the dark one. "What the hell are you, CIA or something?" "Worse for you, John. We're former DEA. Less paperwork, if you know what I mean." Johnny was pretty sure he did. They weren't going to write up what had happened to poor Liz or Liesl. What, like she'd tried to pull a gun on them from her pussy? The white guy crossed the floor in a couple of fast steps and kicked him a swift one in the groin. "That doesn't mean we like wasting our time running after pathetic garbage like you, though. Let's go. Get your pants on." I can't. Where are we going?" Johnny was doubled over with his hands on his crotch, only wishing he could hurl. It felt like his stomach had turned inside out. Just shoot me and get it over with." "Yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you? Join your little girlfriend in the everlasting. Afraid it's not going to be that easy, my friend." The two guys leaned over and started wrapping him in the motel bedsheet. They pulled the corners up all around, tied them tight. Johnny couldn't even take his hands off his meat to do anything. Then they dragged him out the door like he was a bag of dirty laundry. That's when he would have started screaming if he'd had the air for it, because Johnny Tucci had just figured out where they were going and what was going to happen next.
Chapter 16. When Caroline's mother pulled the black Chevy Suburban into the parking area at Rock Creek Cemetery, it was the first time I'd seen her in over 20 years. We'd spoken on the phone about funeral arrangements, but now that it was here, I didn't know what to expect or really what to say to her. I opened the car door myself. "Michelle, hi." She looked the same to me, still pretty, with the same long, wild hair, shot through with gray now, half tamed in a braid twisting down her back. It was her eyes that were different. They'd always been so alive. I could see she'd been crying, but they were dry now. Dry, red around the rims, and so very tired. "I forgot how much you looked like him," she said. She meant Blake. He and I had always been unmistakably brothers, at least physically, especially in the face. Blake was buried here at Rock Creek, too. I held up my arm and was a little surprised that she took it. We started walking toward St. Paul's, with the rest of the family not far behind. "Michelle, I want you to know that I'm handling Caroline's case myself. If there's anything you need from me." "There's not, Alex." It came out quickly, a simple statement of fact. When she spoke again, her voice started to shake. "I'm going to lay my baby to rest." She stopped to take a steadying breath. "And then I'm going to go back home to Providence. That's as much as I can handle right now." "You don't have to go through this alone. You can come stay at the house. Nana and I would like that. I know it's been a long time. A long time since you turned your back on your brother." So there it was. 20 years of misunderstanding coming out just like that. Blake's addiction had done a lot of the talking for him near the end. He'd cut me out when I got aggressive about rehab, but that was obviously not what he told Michelle, who was using heroin at the time too, even while she was pregnant with Caroline. "It was actually the other way around," I said to her as gently as I could. For the first time, her voice rose. "I can't, Alex. I can't go back to that house, so don't ask me to." "Of course you can." We both turned around. It was Nana who'd spoken. Bree, Janny, and Ali were there too, coming up on either side of Nana, her honor guard, her protectors. Then she walked right up to Michelle and put her arms around her. "We lost sight of you and Caroline a long time ago. And now we've lost her for good. but you are still a part of our family. You always will be. Nana stepped back and put a hand on Janny's shoulder. Janelle, Ali, this is your Aunt Michelle. I'm very sorry for your loss, Janny said. Nana went on. Whatever happened before today, or whatever happens tomorrow, doesn't mean a thing right now. Her voice was filling with emotion, and I could hear shades of the Southern Baptist heritage coming through. We're here to remember Caroline with all the love we have in our hearts. When those goodbyes are over, then we'll worry about what comes next. Michelle seemed conflicted. She looked around at each of us, not speaking a word. So all right then, Nana said. She patted her chest a few times. Lord, all this grief has given me an awful feeling. Michelle, take my arm, would you? I knew Nana's heart was breaking too. Caroline was her granddaughter, though she never really got to know her, and gone forever now. Meanwhile, there was someone else here who needed her help. Maybe that's where I get it, I thought. Sometimes the best or only way to take care of the dead is to take care of the living. Chapter 17. Michelle did go back to her home in Rhode Island that night. I put her on a plane to Providence myself, but I made sure she had my numbers and told her that I hoped we'd hear from her when she was ready. The next morning, I was right back at it, the investigation of her daughter's awful murder and possibly the murders of others. The first thing I tackled at the office was the phone numbers we'd found at Caroline's apartment and in Timothy O'Neill's bedroom. My backup plan was to hit up the bureau for help, but I had a feeling about these numbers. If there was a key to unlocking them, it was probably something that Caroline or Timothy O'Neill could use on a regular basis. I was betting I could do this myself. I started by writing out all the lettered strings I had on a piece of paper, just to get them rolling around in my head. A simple A to Z 1 through 26 substitution didn't seem right, since anything above J or 10 wouldn't apply to a phone keypad. But what if it came off the keypad itself? I opened my cell on the desk and wrote down what I saw. ABC 2, DEF 3, GHI 4, I equals 1, JKL 5, MNO 6, O equals 0, PQRS 7, TUV 8, WXYZ 9. The 1 and the 0 keys didn't have any letters of their own, of course, but the I and the O seemed like intuitive substitutions. That still left G and H for number 4, and M and N for number 6. When I used that logic to translate the first string, BGEOGZAPMO, it gave me 243-049-2760. Then I took the first 3 digits and Googled them as an area code, but 243 came up invalid. It felt too soon to abandon the idea, so I kept going with it. I translated the rest of my list into numbers and lined them all up in a column on the page to see if anything jumped out at me. It sure did. Nearly half the numbers started with a 2. It didn't take long from there to see that all of those numbers had a 0 in the 4th position and another 2 in the 7th. 202 is Washington's area code. I went back to the first number and underlined 243-049-2760. Things were starting to come together. When I looked at the same positions on the non-202 numbers, all but 3 gave me either 703 or 301, which are for areas of Virginia and Maryland close to D.C. The final 3 codes turned out to be from Florida, South Carolina, and Illinois. Out-of-town customers, presumably. Again, I went back to the first string. If